Welcome to my budget deck channel where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. So if this is something you'd be interested in, then why not subscribe? Today with a fan favorite, I want to say. Lots of people have requested this deck and I have heed the calls. This is the Plunder Patroll deck list. I'm already saying this. This has been one of the harder attempts to turn into a budget deck because the deck is just so incredibly expensive. Not necessarily with the super rares, but the ultra rares. Every necessary card, every good card seems to be an ultra rare. And let's address the elephant in the room here. I only have 2 field spells. That is not for the reason that I didn't test it with 3. The point why I do only have 2 is because till a day ago, I wanted to make a deck list that included 2 field spells and 1 terraforming, because obviously this card used to be a lot better in terms of budget value because you can use it in any deck that used the field spell, and it would have done the same purpose as running 3 field spells. Now I can't even run 4, even if I would want to, or for budget reasons we can't anyway. So the deck stays the exact same, but you kind of lose out on the whole. Technically with Terraforming you can beat hand traps. With the field spell you can't, because you want the field spell effect to go through. So if you would have had Terraforming and the field spell in hand, this would have been better than having 2 of the field spells. Can't do that now, but the deck plays the same, so it doesn't really matter if I have not play tested it with 3 field spells, because I have play tested this with 3 field spells. Let's move on to the card by card. We run lots of the Master Pack bundle staples in here because this deck is reasonably competitive and can go second. So running good go second cards make a lot of sense, and you get these cards basically for free, so don't count them towards the ultra account, because most people have picked up one of them because they are in these 10 pack bundles and you get them for free, plus the 10 packs for 750 gems if I'm not mistaken. So this is a good deal. And when I talk about them, I mean Ash Blossom at 1, Nibiru at 1, Infinite Impermanence at 1, and Forbidden Droplet at 1. You can substitute them with anything that you want. That kind of does do some go second stuff as well if you want to, but I feel like the hand traps are just a very strong thing, and since you get them kind of for free, that's what I suggest. But obviously there's lots of different things. Then we have a small package of monsters that kind of extend or start some place in this deck. They're mainly in here because, well, we lose access to some of the important cards with only being able to run 3 field spells and not 4, so we have to make up for that somehow. And the deck is kind of bricky from time to time if you don't run some of the good engines that you can run in here. One of the engines would be the Adventure package, a very, very popular engine for this one, because it kind of, well, uses discards a little bit in some sense. And also the other engine would be the Runic engine. So we have lots of different things on our agenda, like Runic you could be playing, mixing with this deck. You could be mixing the adventures with this deck, but since we don't do any of this, we need to fill this deck with some other extenders or some other cards that give you some board presence. And I decided to go with one White Stingray because most of your monsters are water monsters, and this card is a level 4, and technically if it's special summoned from the graveyard, it can be treated as a tuner. You do run Monster Reborn, so it can technically come up, so it's not too bad. Plus, some of your Plunder monsters actually want to be discarded and have a pretty good effect being discarded, so the discard comes in handy as well. But you have to watch out. Some of the, or actually quite a lot of the Plunder monsters do lock you into just summoning fiends or plunders or whatnot. So there's lots of locks in this deck. So watch out, you want to do these kind of things first, but your opponent can't respond to this, so you get the summon off anyway with White Stingray. Then there's 2 Danger Mothman in here, because even if you can summon it, although it's good to dig deeper into your deck, possibly get another Plunder card that you actually needed, and get stuff to the graveyard, which the cards have graveyard effect, so that can be nice. And it works as a bridge for the one-off small world, which I'll be talking about in a second. And also, even if you can't summon it anymore because you're locked, the effect of this card being discarded, which you have lots of cards that discard random cards as well, not random, but not necessarily just Plunder cards. So you can use the second effect of this card as well, and then dig for even more stuff, trigger some more of the Plunder cards. So I felt like this small 3-card engine can come in handy because you do need level 4 monsters on board. Your important Link monster only needs 1 Plunder monster, you don't need 2, so that works with that as well. And obviously for the Xyz monsters, for the Synchro Summons, this works well. The only thing that doesn't work for is for the Fusion monster. Well, that's usually not that big of a deal in general because you still run most of, all of the Plunder main deck monsters anyway. We have Whitebeard, one of the important ones. It's one of the 2 that can tag out during your opponent's turn into any of your extract monsters, depending on what attribute the monster in your opponent's graveyard or on the field have. This is a recurring theme. Lots of cards in this deck work with this, and I feel like Plunders are a deck that combine 3 playstyles in one, basically 3 gimmicks, because obviously you have the gimmick of them summoning stuff from the extra deck depending on what attribute the monsters your opponents have, and also you have the whole thing that the monsters, the plunder monsters, will be acting as spell traps from time to time, as equip spells, more like it. So that is another gimmick, and there is the whole rank 4, level 4, whatever gimmick that they can have access to any kind of extra deck monster. So there is that as well. And technically another gimmick would be that they do discard and get played off of discard effects or being sent from the field to the graveyard, so there is that as well. Lots of different gimmicks in one deck. Usually one deck has about one gimmick. This one has multiple. It is what it is. This effect can be quite neat. It's also a tuner, and the second effect is where it really comes into play. If this card is sent from the hand or a monster zone to the graveyard, you can activate this effect, special summon 1 Plunder Patrol monster from your deck, except Whitebeard. Also, there's the lock, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn except Plunder Patrol monsters. So a very, very harsh lock, but obviously this effect is still amazing, summons from deck, so that is very, very neat. We have Redbeard, a card that's not so neat. It's probably the only main deck plunder monster that I would cut down to 2 if I could, because I feel like I'm lacking certain cards in here, so I need to fill up the slots. And also being able to summon Redbeard during the opponent's turn by discarding Whitebeard can be nice, because then you can go into another extra deck monster with the effect of Redbeard, because it has the same first effect as Whitebeard. The second effect isn't that important when this card leaves the field or it gets sent from the hand to the graveyard. It can equip to one of your Plunder Patrol monsters as an equip spell, not that great, but the first effect is where it's at, so this is quite important. We have Bluebeard, very, very nice card. It can special summon itself from the hand, so it's an extender, or it's a play starter in a sense, because that's how you can go into extra deck monsters. And it has basically the same effect as Mothman, because when this card is sent from the hand or monster zone to the graveyard, you can discard 1 card, then draw 1 card. Sadly, the discard is before the semicolon, so it's a cost, and if they then technically ash you or negate it, then you lose out on resources. Not that big of an issue, but yeah, that can be problematic from time to time. Now we have Goldenhair, one of the better ones in my opinion, because first of all, it's a tuner. Second of all, it has 2000 defense position points, which can be very helpful from time to time when summoning it off of Whitebeard, because sometimes this blocks enough that you can't survive to the next turn. Not what you want to use it for, but can be done. And this card has 2 ways of special summoning itself, 1 from hand and 1 from the graveyard. It discards stuff, so that's quite nice. And you can use each of the effect once per turn, so this card can technically special summon itself twice, so very nice. And if you would be playing Almirage, that would come in more handy, because then you could just normal summon this, link it into Almirage, then discard a card, special summon this on the graveyard, then go into your link monster, and that would be a play. But obviously Almirage for a budget deck that already has a problem with having too many ultra rares, not what you want to be doing. We have Blackeyes, very, very nice card as well. It can recycle your extra deck monsters, very important for the budget version, and it can give you cards back to your hand, which you need for the discards of the extra deck monsters. So this does multiple things, and if it's sent to the graveyard, then it can special summon one of your plunder equip cards up back to the field. Doesn't come up too much, but it can come up from time to time. Plus, it's another special summon that, although it needs some stuff on the field to work. We have double Radian, the multidimensional Kaiju. First of all, it puts a dark monster in your opponent's board, so that's quite nice. The aqua, the water one would also work, but we take what we can get from budget standpoint. And also, technically you could use the light one, but I feel like this Kaiju works because it's a fiend, so it works as a bridge for Small World as well, which can be very nice. Already talked about Nibiru, is a very good card, especially if you go in second. Going second, this deck is quite nice, so putting the 1 free Raigeki that you should have in here isn't too bad either. It has won me a few games because it's just a very sacky card, and in the grind game this can help you actually beat your opponent, because you have lots of ways of drawing some cards and cycling through your deck, so it can come up more often than you want. You can also play Lightning Storm, but this card is a bit better in certain scenarios when you already have an established board, and since you want to have your field spell open, this can be problematic. We have Monster Reborn, because you get this card for free, and it can be an extender if your opponent annoys you during your plays, and sometimes you want another monster on board with your Blackbeard, so you can use Blackbeard again during the opponent's turn, so you can use the effect twice and get 2 extra deck monsters out, and so on and so on and so on. So this card would be nice, but you don't have to play it if you don't want to. It's just a neat extender from time to time. We have one of the Plunder Patrol Shipshape ships shipping, a very annoying name to say. But yeah, it is in here. It's a fusion. Technically, you can use it to fusion summon, but usually you mainly run it for because it's searchable, and it's good for the extra deck effect, for the discard effect, because then you can discard this with any of your effects and then equip one emblem of the Plunder Patrol or one Plunder Patrol monster from your deck to a target that you control. It has to be a Plunder Patrol monster, but it doesn't really matter that much. You can cut this, but I like it at 1 because it's somewhat searchable with multiple different effects, and if you then discard it instantly for another effect, you still gain some advantage at least. The one-off Small World, and you can technically play it at 2, and you can technically substitute it with other things, but especially since we lost Terraforming, I felt like this card is a card to make up for the fact that sometimes this deck is a bit bricky. We run Danger Mothman and the Kaiju anyway because it does a lot for the deck in the first place, so I thought why not include the Small World so we can actually go into one of the plunder cards that we really want in our hand, and that can be somewhat helpful from time to time because sometimes you have hands that do not do very much, and having one more card that could search out something very useful for you would help the deck certainly. I also toyed around with playing Foolish Burial Goods because first of all you have the Shipshape, and second of all you can recycle the Shipyarrrd if you have one Plunder Equip spell. Can be coming in handy if you wanted to, but I felt like in the end it didn't work out that well for me, so I decided to go with Small World. You can cut Small World and try it out if without it, how consistent it is. I felt like I really profited from having one of them in here, but you could technically also play like 2 Pot of Desires and just draw more cards because there's not that many cards that you want to be banishing, that you don't do care about banishing in the end, so like it doesn't matter if you banish certain cards, you have enough of the important stuff in the deck anyways. And also we have the double emblem because this card can special summon a extra deck monster for you, but the problem with this is you can special summon one Plunder Patrol monster from the extra deck with the same attribute as a monster on the field or in the graveyard. At least the thing is, it only has to be on your side of the field or graveyard, so that at least gets you into some shenanigans, especially with stuff like Mothman. It can come in handy because you can go to the dark one. It doesn't really rely on your opponent's attributes, so this can be nice, and also the whole attack boost is okay. We have the Shipyarrrd, very, very nice card, one of the main playmakers, sadly an ultra rare, a bit annoying, but it's what it is. Boosts your monsters by 500 to 1500 or 2000 attack most of the time, and also you can discard one card, any cards, and add one Plunder Patrol card from your deck to your hand. And if this card is in your graveyard, you can target one Plunder Patrol card in your spell trap zone, set this card, and if you do, return that target to the hand. Also works with the equip spell and also works with the continuous trap card, so that's not too bad. Now, one of the other big elephants in this room, what is this card doing in here? Enemy Controller. It not only does it trigger your Plunder Patrol monster effects on board, that if they are being sent to the graveyard from the field, that triggers that. Also, you can then use your opponent's monsters with Blackbeard to go into some of the extra deck monsters. Can be problematic because then they're not equipped with a Plunder Patrol card, so that's a bit of an issue. You can use it to link into it as well. There's plenty of stuff that you can use it for, and in the worst case, it's just something that is, well, stops your opponent's monster from attacking. It's a niche card. I wanted to mention it here, but obviously you can just play like good cards like Triple Tactic Talents as a good card. You can play like Dark Ruler No More as a good card. You could technically even play things like, if you wanted to go down on the go second variant, could play Interrupted Kaiju Slumber and run a few more Kaijus. If you just like the whole fact of having a card that can make you go first and second and has something to offer, but you don't want it to be enemy controller, then you can use Book of Moon. But I felt like in testing, this card actually helped in a lot of scenarios. It wasn't too bad, so try it out. If you really don't like it, then cut it for something else. But it's a bit of a cheeky, interesting play in my personal opinion. Forbidden Chalice, also one of these cards that you could just run hand traps for, any stuff that works out. Ghost Bell, Maxi, DD Crow, Triple Ash Blossom, all of these cards that do stuff. Infinite Impermanence comes to mind, everything works. But this card can sometimes be better than Impermanence because you can use it during your turn when you have monsters on board already. We have Forbidden Droplet, very, very nice card going first and second. Impermanence, same for that one. And one Plunder Patrol Booty. This card is very searchable. It is a card that keeps recycling stuff from your graveyard, so that is very nice. And also it works around the fact that if your opponent doesn't have monsters with the right attribute, then you can force them to have monsters with the right attribute, so there's that. And yes, it sends itself to the graveyard if you don't have a Plunder Patrol monster during the end phase on board. Can be annoying, but it is what it is. For the extra deck, we have a double Plunder Patrol ship. I want to call it Loose. I know lots of people say Lice, but I feel like Loose sounds more Nordic and that sounds more Vikingish, so that's why I want to go with the pirate Viking theme of the deck. We can cut this down to 1 if you want to. It's not super essential, and you have multiple ways of getting this card back to the extra deck from your graveyard, so technically 1 is fine. I just wanted to put in 2 because the super rare section of this deck isn't too big, so yeah, 2 works, but if you want to cut it down to 1, that's also still fine if you still want to try out the deck. This card is a monster negate and searches you basically any kind of plunder card from your deck to your hand, so that's very nice, and it can special summon one of the plunder equipped monsters. So overall, very neat card for the deck. We have 1 judgment in here because this card is a cheap level 8 synchro with a good attack stats. That's basically what I'm using it for. You can obviously play stuff like Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend. You can play any kind of other cards that's good going first or good second. There are plenty level 8 synchros that work, but you obviously have to watch out. A lot of the time you will be locked into Plunder, so this doesn't come up anyway. 1 Plunder Patrol Shipyarrrd, mainly because spell trap removal isn't that great, and the whole all other monsters you control gain 500 attack isn't super important. So the effects are decent because you then can add like a plunder monster to your hand as well, and so on. And the attack stats can help you beat over stuff because this is your highest attack point beater with the field spell combined. This can easily go up to 4,000, 4,500. So at 1, it's nice and you can recycle it, but the more important one is Morg. But let's talk about the Synchro Pendulum card that we have new. This card can be very nice, can set up your place, it can give you a token and your opponent a token, and you can decide which attribute it is, so that's nice. It can recur stuff from the graveyard, but keep in mind, if it recurs stuff from the graveyard and you don't add it to your hand but to your extra deck, then this card doesn't get put into your pendulum zone, so you have that bit of an issue. If you want to keep this card on board, then that's nice. If you don't, then if you want to use the second effect, that then can be problematic, but that can recycle your extra monsters, so not too bad. And if this card is on board while your opponent summons a monster, then you can special summon stuff, search stuff, very nice effect, but it doesn't interact with your opponent, so can be a bit problematic using this card. So from time to time, we have now the budget stuff, budget rank 4, this can be good for graveyard shenanigans. Double Morg, because this card banishes one monster, very neat, especially against Tearlaments, because banishing their kit clothes and things can be devastating to them, so very nice. Plus it searches your Plunder spell trap among the way, so that can search your field spell. Your field spell is good resource management, good searcher, so in the end that's nice. And an effect that many people will forget, if a Plunder Patrol cards you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can detach 1 material from this card instead, so it has a double protection, so that's very neat, and it can stay on board a bit longer than some people might think. Another ship that has nothing to do with this, Gankensu ship, just for rank 4 Xyz, put in any good ones if you have them. Obviously Baguska comes to mind. You can also play Zeus because you have the attack, the Heartland Draco if you want to, and so on and so on. You have plenty of Xyz that can attack. We run 1 Blackbeard, and this is the card that you probably want to be running at least at 2. 3 is probably even better, but we will try to make do with 1 because we have plenty of ways recycling it, plenty of ways to special summon it from your equip zone as well, so there's lots of things that can get this card back, and this is the card that can help you first of all draw a card and also special summon any of your extra deck monsters. Very neat, and like you see, 2 monsters including a Plunder Patrol monster, so you only need 1 as well. Geonator, Transverser, Decode Talker, Power Code Talker, and Raster Ligo are just the finishing touch, budget touch for this deck, because sometimes you need Power Code Talker to get over stuff, and this is a budget Access Code Talker. Things like Nightmare Phoenix and Unicorn are obviously great additions for this deck as well. And the rest I've already probably talked about. Obviously, Evenly Match is a card that's very nice right now, and Called by the Grave, a card that can also be helpful because hand traps are very annoying for this deck as much as they are for most other decks. Pride of the Plunder Patrol, a card that I wanted to run, I didn't really see fit, but look at your opponent's extra deck and send 1 monster from it to the graveyard can be devastating to some decks, so that's not bad. And if your Plunder Patrol monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle, draw a card, not too bad either, but you'd rather use this effect in my opinion, but I didn't feel like it was strong enough to main deck this one over any other card. But I feel like the effect isn't actually terrible, and you might be able to play this in a certain meta where this becomes really important that your opponent can't get off a certain extra deck monster. So there's that. Let's move on to the rating section. Alright, let's get into the rating section. Let's talk about what this deck can do. This specific list, not Plunder Patrol, this specific list in terms of power level, the strengths, how strong is this deck? Well, it's a bit difficult, I want to say. I want to give this a very, 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 very low 3 out of 5. It lacks a bit of power in certain ways that other decks that did give a 3 out of 5 have. The thing is why, in my opinion, it still is a 3 out of 5 is that it is good going first and going second. It has place for both ends, and it's not because you make compromises, but just because of how the deck functions. You don't have to make adjustments towards it, you just, well, it just works like that. So that is a nice plus for it, and that is why I would rate this higher than certain other decks, because that makes it a lot better on the ladder technically, because you can go second and don't have to instantly concede if you go second, or instantly concede if you have to go first if you play go second deck. So that is what makes it a 3 out of 5, but power level wise, without the upgrades that you would need for this deck, it isn't that great in total because it lacks certain power. If you get a very good combo off, then this deck can be very strong. It can easily OTK and it can put up 2 or 3 disruptions, so it's not too bad with that either. But the lines aren't as clear. You need a lot of specific cards for them, and you need to not be disrupted in certain choke points. So it isn't that crazy, but it does have a lot of versatility and it does have a lot of, well, follow-up plays. So there's that. I feel like a 3 out of 5 would be fine. Let's talk about the consistency of this deck, and there I will give it a, well, I want to say a very, very high 2 out of 5, but I'm actually going to stick with the very low 3 out of 5 with this one, because this deck has lots of different searches, it has lots of different ways to do things with the whole discard engine and whatnot. It has ways of getting other plays out. The thing is that if you would still have terraforming, it would be a bit more consistent, so technically we lost a bit of consistency in there, but you can consistency with Blackbeard get out one of your monsters. Consistency is a bit hard with this deck though, because it does rely on your opponent's board or your opponent's graveyard a lot. So it's very hard to say how consistent this deck is, because it depends on who you're playing against a lot of the time, which isn't necessarily something that is good for a deck. But consistency wise, yes, I would say a very low 3 out of 5. It works and it can put up plays most of the time, but sometimes you will be getting shut down and then there's nothing you can do. But that's kind of the same for most budget decks that aren't Sword Soul Tenyu, for example. When it comes to budget value, this is where it will lose plenty of points. I will give it a straight up 2 out of 5, could even be on the lower end of that, because this deck is, first of all, very, very expensive when it comes to the ultra rares. The super rares are fine. If you cut some stuff here and there, you don't need too many. You basically just need the extra deck ones. The fact that I put in Small World in here doesn't even have to be included if you don't want to. So it isn't that expensive in that regard, but it is quite expensive when it comes to the ultra rares. And this is just the bare minimum of what you kind of have to run. You usually have to run a lot more. And also for budget value, it doesn't really have any generic cards in here, especially since terraforming isn't a thing anymore. And also the splashability is very poor. Yes, you can include some engines like the adventure engine because it doesn't harm you too much. You can include some stuff like the runic things because it doesn't harm you too much. But first of all, these are both very expensive engines. Second of all, they might not be around for as long. I mean, the adventure should be fine, but runic, who knows these days? Runic keeps getting hit randomly sometimes, so there's that. And other than that, since everything basically locks you, you can only play it with like control decks. So Labyrinth might be a thing because of Fiends. I'm working on something. I'm cooking. Let's just stay tuned for that one. Other than that, not that much you can really do with the deck. It is a mainly pure version, and all the ultra rares are very specific for this one deck that you cannot cram into anything else anyway, because all of these cards want you to discard a plunder card from your hand, so you have to run enough plunder cards so that works out. So not that much you can do about it. So a 2 out of 5, sadly. But that doesn't mean it's bad. That just means it is kind of more expensive than a lot of other decks that you could be building with these kind of crafting materials, and you won't get the most out of it in terms of mixing it with other things. Let's move on to the replay. Alright, replay, we are going second. I know, crazy, that doesn't happen too often, but this hand is fairly decent at going second as well, so not too much of a problem. We did start with one of the field spell. That's usually like a better hand, but also can be devastating if your opponent shuts down the effect, because then you just lose material. So it's a bit of an upside or a downside. It can get you lots of stuff, but it also has some issues. They do something what I find interesting. They still put enough plays in the end, and the board is still impressive enough. But I'm not sure if this is what you want to be doing. Small World, away the Simoon. Maybe that's the only card they had in hand and they didn't have any other way of getting into what they want. But I think even the Black Whirlwind combo would have searched them the exact card that they search now. We will have to see with that one. They get rid of one of the Kaijus, fair enough. And then they add the another card, the Blackwing Sudria, they could have added its Black Whirlwind. I don't understand why they didn't just go for the Simoon play. Maybe they wanted to really use the small one. Maybe they thought, let's bait out an Ash Blossom. And I was like, nah, I'm not going to Ash Blossom this yet because I want to see what happens from that point onwards. So then they realized, well, now we lost the Simoon in hand. I don't know what the play was here, but it still works out for them in the end. It doesn't really overly matter that much for them. Then they used the effect of this one and they add stuff, and I was like, nah, I don't want you to add any good things since you already got rid of Simoon, but it doesn't matter. So it wasn't even for the Ash anyway with the small world. I don't know what they tried to do, and maybe they wanted to keep Crossout Designator, possibly, I don't know. But yeah, the Ash Blossom does nothing here, and then they just pop off. We'll just go through the combo. Blackwing stuff, all the things that you can kind of do with the structure deck as well, so if you want to check that one out, you can. They have all things in the graveyard. They don't run that many different things. This is the one card that they run that is a bit different besides Fall World that you don't have with the structure deck, but it is what it is. The extra normal summon is quite nice because this card's effect is weirdly enough well, not once per turn. I think the other one is, so you can use this multiple times per turn. Interesting with the nothing, whatever you want to call it. Now they just go into the classic normal combos, but this is not meant to be a Blackwing deck profile. We all know what this deck does. This is meant to be a Plunder Patrol deck profile. Nearly forgot. They went into the double winged assault dragon, which is interesting. I would have thought they wanted to go into one Armored Master, but this card I guess is easier to summon out. But I think they had the material even on board, if I'm not mistaken, so don't know. But this is the whole we get burned for basically everything we do, plus paired with Maxi and a potential board wipe. This can be somewhat devastating. So yeah, could Kaiju this, but then I would give them a draw. So there's a bit of a different route that I want to be taking here, because I already know what they have in graveyard. So with Redbeard, just normal summon it. I can go into extra deck stuff during their turn, and I don't give them any extra cards, and it's not too hard to stop them from OTKing from that position onwards, because there are some plays that we can be doing, especially with Shipyarrrd. We can search out some other cards that give us like Whitebeard, and Whitebeard then can be discarded during their turn. And then with this, we can be doing all sorts of nonsense. I decided to discard Danger Mothman, could have used the effect, I don't think I do in the end. And I just, like I said, go for Redbeard, because then we can go into the Xyz ship, and the Xyz ship can then discard Whitebeard, and Whitebeard then special summons a monster from the extra deck. And sadly, the problem with this one is that it doesn't summon another Redbeard. Well, it can, but the problem is we can't use the Redbeard effect again, so we can't go into another extra monster. It is what it is. We could have obviously done a few different plays here. We could have gone for the Mothman effect, potentially discarding Whitebeard, then summoning out stuff, then go into our Link monster, go into our Synchro monsters, but we would have given them too many draws along the line, and I don't think we could have finished this game here just with the hand that we had, and potentially running into stuff like Ash Blossoms, Nibirus and whatnots. So I felt like playing it safe was the better option. Could have set Small World as a, well, scare trap card that might be doing stuff, but I wanted to keep it because I still have the Kaiju, because I didn't even use that one. So potentially next turn I could search something out of my deck if they get rid of the Shipyarrrd as well. That is mainly what the idea was. So we let them get into their turn, they summon this one, and I thought at this point they could go into that Evil Swarm rank 4 that I didn't want them to go into, because then they could stop me from summoning this or instantly flip it over, and that would be a bit annoying for me. So I wanted to do this now before they can get into any crazy combo, or I can get rid of whatever they go into, and they wouldn't go into Baguska because that would hinder their turn more than it would hinder mine at this point. So I have one banish and have one search for the next turn, and I have another summon. They go for the plays again, and I thought at this point get rid of one of their big monsters, just first of all so I don't get that much burn damage anymore, because that can cost me a lot of life points, and at this point you don't really want to. Could have gotten rid of the tuner here, so they just couldn't go into anything else anymore. Might have been a bit smarter, because we would still survive this with the two monsters on board, because I can summon a 2000 defense points beater, and this card protects one of my monsters from being destroyed as well. So would have still been fine if I got rid of the tuner, I think. Not 100% sure. Now we summon out the 2000 defense by defender, and we also have a tuner then for the next turn. They go into more plays, they can send stuff to the graveyard, they send the pop card, so they could get rid of some of that as well, but they didn't want to use it yet because they felt like they couldn't go for game. I'm not sure if they could have gone for game here, don't really know For some reason, I didn't get to the Protect in. I'm not 100% sure why that is. I might have made a mistake along the line, or I just clicked it away. But usually if a Plunder Patrol card you control would be destroyed by battle, you can attach one material from this card instead. Oh, it's because the card didn't have any material because I summoned it with Redbeard. So keep that one in mind. No protection because you have to have one material. This is where they actually use the Xyz material for this effect, and because the other effect isn't actually Xyz material. So yeah, maybe they could have extended a bit more and actually finished the game here, because I am quite low on life points. Kind of glad that they didn't, but now they have to go through this one as well. They can summon my monster back now, so nothing on my side of the board, very annoying, but we still have enough place to finish them here. And as luck wanted it, we do draw into Raigeki. This is the why I don't like Saki one-offs, but sometimes the Saki one-offs work very well into your favor. But even without them, we still would have had Plunder Patrol Ship, although they do have this card here, so one to watch out with that one. They could have popped the Shipyarrrds, and then we would have been a bit lost, but we could have still used Small World with the Kaiju to search one of the Plunder Patrol starters, and then we could have done stuff with things in our graveyard, because we still have things in our graveyard. We could have added that back to the hand, then the normal summon stuff, so we would have still had plays. Then we could have used the ship that we sent to the graveyard with the field spell effect, so we could have equipped something from deck, and then we could have used the Whitebeard effect, so we could have extended a lot even if they got rid of our Shipyarrrd. Plus Raigeki would have been a different card as well in our hand, then that potentially would have done something for us. So yeah, not too bad. But yes, at this point I just decide, oh, let's Raigeki the board, and they concede. It is what it is from time to time. Alright, second one also goes second. It's a bit of a messy one, but it showcases what this deck can do a lot better than some of the other ones that I would have had, because a lot of the games are just decided by hand traps these days, and that's not good for a showcase. It might be good for gameplay, but it might not be good to show off what the deck can actually do. So we're playing against a deck that is a bit awkward. They decide to go first, and they do play a deck that you will see later on isn't necessarily a go first deck, although Lord of the Heavenly Prison plus set 1 might make you believe it is. You can already tell they did start with 6 cards in hand because they had Puff Desires, and they only set 1 card, so their hand must be a bit iffy, or there's something waiting that we don't quite understand. They opted to go first, just saying this here, no judgment, but you will see what I'm complaining about. And let's slow this down this turn, because this deck has lots of different plays. Summon Whitebeard here, go into Bluebeard. Technically could have also summoned Redbeard, but I wanted the special summon from Whitebeard, because if this card is into the graveyard, you get to special summon, and the lock didn't really matter all that much, but you have to watch out with the lock, because then I can't use the Nibiru or the Kaiju, because you can only summon Plunder Patrol monsters, so there's that. But obviously in this turn I didn't expect to really use either of them, so it didn't really matter. Then we summon out this one, and now also we go into the Synchro Ship, but most importantly, chain blocking here. Use this effect first, and use the other effect of Bluebeard second, because now if they want to Ash Blossom something, or want to negate something, then they can only negate Bluebeard, and we don't really care that much about that. I had a free discard anyway. Technically the other way can also make more sense, but you lose out on 1 card regardless, no matter what you do. I felt like Nibiru didn't really help me against a trap-based deck, so I thought, yeah, let's get rid of this, but I could also have gotten rid of the Kaiju if I wanted to. They have Gravedigger's Trap Hole, so very nice, the whole chain blocking, so we still get Whitebeard out, and that is very important, because we do want Goldenhair here, and we do get Goldenhair. They burn us for 2000 damage, oof, can be problematic at one point. Getting Goldenhair out here now, and they decide to special summon Lord of the Heavenly Prison. Very good for us, because now we get to trigger the effect of the patrol ship, and they set Terraforming, something you cannot be doing anymore. Don't get fooled, but at this point they still could. And yeah, you wonder what deck this is where you want to set Terraforming for this one. You shall see in a second. I don't know if this is a normal build of this deck, but I didn't think so. We use the effect of Patrol Ship to add 1 Shipyarrrd to our hand, and technically, if this card was equipped with a Plunder Patrol card, we could have also special summoned a monster from the deck. Now we can add 1 card back from the graveyard and get this into a pendulum zone, decide to get a Whitebeard back for the opponent's turn, then can create a token. I decide to go for fire here, because this seems to be first of all, a deck that uses lots of back row, and I tunnel a bit on the whole trying to out-resource them rather than just going for a game finisher here, where the fire ship is also not too bad at. I decide to get rid of one of their good monsters here in case I want to be finishing, and steal that one to be able to go into Blackbeard, because we can still get Goldenhair back from the graveyard, so that's nice. And Blackbeard does it here, and now is where I make a mistake because I tunnel too much on what I want to be doing the next turn and don't realize how much of an attack boost this deck can put up. You'll see in a second what I mean. I used the effect of Goldenhair, did Ascent to the Grave at Redbeard, equip Redbeard to Blackbeard, so we get even more attack from the field spell, so that is quite nice. And now I use the effect of Blackbeard going into the work for the next turn, I thought, to get rid of whatever they can put up and to be able to search Spell Trap. But for some reason, I special summon it in defense position, which this effect, it doesn't say. You can special summon attack position, absolutely no problem. I thought, oh yeah, this is going to be a grindy-ish kind of thing, so I would rather have this on board like that. Didn't make much sense because with the other place that I had, I could finish the game because I could use the effect of this one and get rid of the token on their side of the field. Would have to discard a card by this point. I felt like I didn't want to because I wanted to keep Whitebeard for the next turn, but was absolutely pointless here. Could have gotten rid of that one and then replaced it with a spell card as well. And now we can use the field spell because we haven't used that one as well. I could search anything and go in for this one because this can extend our plays. Add back the Bluebeard from our graveyard to our hand. Oof, bit of a stutterer here. And now I can, with the Blackeyes on board, can use the Emblem, and the Emblem summons me a monster from the extra deck as well. And since they have a fire token, we can go into a fire monster, and this is the one that also boosts the attack of all of our other monsters, something that people keep forgetting, and I kept forgetting here. So we can not only get rid of terraforming, we could have finished the game here by getting rid of the token by using the effect of the patrol ship. So that would have been one of the options here. There were multiple different lines, I think, that would have won the game at this point. But that was technically one of them. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this would have been game if I just summoned this in attack position and used the effect. And you can use it on the token, even though it says banish. I think that's still not a problem. And also can discard some stuff now. We add some stuff back. We have more cards in hand now for the next turn. Getting rid of the terraforming. And now trying to get in as much damage as possible. Didn't really matter, obviously, because we could have finished this game anyway. Would have also worked if I just turned this to attack position and didn't use the effect, if I'm not mistaken, because this plus this would have already been a game as well. So very, very poor decision. But you can see what kind of board you can put up if your opponent doesn't really disrupt you. Then you can put up some nice plays with certain things. And I got to show off what enemy controller can do. Also very, very fun. Now we have to wait. What deck are they actually playing? Lava Golem in a Go First deck. What? Numeron Wall. What? They play a Numeron deck, and the good thing is they had to get rid of, first of all, Blackbeard. They had to get rid of the patrol ship, otherwise we would have just banished Numeron Network. And technically they also had to get rid of this card, so there was nothing much they could have done about our board here, because one of our cards will be enough to disrupt them either way. And they summon out their monsters. They have another Pot of Desires, probably stuck in their hand from the last turn, why they didn't do anything with it. Draw more cards, and they try to go for the OTK here, but obviously if I time this just right, then I can disrupt them here, and their monster doesn't go up to 8,000 attack points, and at this point they can only do us 1,000 more damage. I already get one more monster on board, and I think I could have stopped them from being able to do certain things if I got into Lys here, if I'm not mistaken, because we already used the more effect, so I couldn't have done anything to disrupt these ones, but I could have should have gotten into Lys just to whatever they're going into with the extra egg. If they go into Unicorn to possibly get rid of stuff on our field side, for example, they would have been able to prevent this because they have a light monster on board. So I should have done this instantly when I could have, because this is just doing the opponent's turn, not doing the opponent's main phase. I miscalculated a little bit here, so yeah, would have been better to have Lys here, but in the end it didn't really matter because they go into the Infinite Track Fortress anyway, which does nothing, and they should have noticed. I don't know if the X-Ray didn't have any good cards left, but yeah, this card is one of the only cards that can really easily deal with it, because this can be affected by Xyz monsters, so is that, yeah, can't really do all that much. Now we're going to Lys, it is what it is. They have an out for this because they prepared for Telements, and Defusion can be a budget option against Telements because they cannot summon the monsters back, and you can just return a monster to the extra deck, which can stop some of their things. I don't think it's a good tech card, but it's definitely an interesting one at that. So I liked seeing this one, and now I just use the effect of this to special summon monster back out. So I have more stuff during the next turn, but at this point it didn't really matter. They have two cards they can set, can be potentially dangerous here, so we decided to get rid of this one, and they chain the Ring of Destruction. Very bad for themselves, because that puts them down to 500, because it doesn't burn them because it's not the actual attack of the monster, because it was boosted by 500, and at that point they concede because they know all I have to do is turn this to attack position and win the game. Not the greatest of all opponents or duels or decks or whatever it is, but I could show off what this deck can do and what you have to watch out for and what it possibly cannot do. So there is that. Hope you like this video. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, but most importantly, I hope you have a nice day.